Select destination.
There are things that no one has told you about Excalibur. Things that you need to know. Because there is not one other video that will showcase what I have for you today, and considering these newly discovered things include multiplicative condition overload, a 2,468% status chance increase, and so much more, you need to see this. This video is brought to you by my current YouTube and Patreon members, who also received this video days early. Thank you so much for your help in maintaining the channel. Now, let's get to what you're here for. In Techrot Encore, Excalibur's Exalted Blade, and by extension, every Exalted weapon, was granted access to Arcane's and Exalted slots, with a few in particular receiving some additional changes, and Exalted Blade was one of them. Arcane's and Exalted first. This was something that they have all needed for a really long time. And while it might appear like such a simple change, it has honestly elevated these Exalteds to what I believe is the deserved of the term Exalted weapon. With things like melee afflictions turning Gara's Shattered Lash into a slash damage monster, or Cascadia Flare buffing Mace's regulators to levels not seen before, and honestly, did she really even need? This addition's importance will be reveled in for years after this update, and when concerning Excalibur, well, yeah, that's kind of why you're here, no? Exalted slots on the other hand, or as I should call them, Tennokai slots, cause what else do you use here, are another very powerful addition to this family of weapons. Tennokai allows you to perform faster heavy attacks with no cost to your combo counter, which leads me into the aforementioned changes he received in this update. Regarding Exalted Blade heavies, they will now release a cross-shaped projectile that is approximately 8 meters wide and tall, with infinite punch through, that applies the lifted status to enemies. Possibly even more importantly though, is the addition of Exalted Blade waves now building combo, whereas before Techrot, they didn't. This was less of an issue before because mods like Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds were still locked out of usage on them, but with them being re-enabled, this change makes taking advantage of their incredibly high critical and status chance buffs quite easy. More on that later. Otherwise, Slash Dash is no longer a pseudo exalt, rather it will just inherit the mods off of his very aptly named exalted weapon, Exalted Blade, the brand new best melee in Warframe. Summoning the Exalted Blade costs a meager 25 energy, with it draining a further 2.5 energy per second during the entire time you have it active, whether you are holding it or not. Consistent drains, especially ones this small though, are really nothing to worry about, because if you were unaware, final drain rate is not determined entirely by efficiency, rather it is by this equation, which includes both efficiency and duration when broken down. Doing so is kinda complicated though, this being the absolutely horrible to read chart showcasing all possible combinations, but essentially, if an ability normally has an energy drain of 1 per second, 200% ability duration would cause it to drain 1 energy for every 2 seconds, resulting in a 0.5 split between them. This is mainly due to drain rate being calculated per in-game tick time, though that's too complicated for the point that I'm trying to get across, which is you will not notice the drain this ability has, because building for either of these stats will lower it. Back to the actual weapon though, the sword has moderately okay base critical and status chance at 15% per, the 2.0 critical multiplier being fine. Base damage and attack speed are stated to be 250 and 0.833, but seeing as Excalibur's swordsmanship passive is always active for Exalted Blade, it is actually 275 and 0.917. The 275 is split unequally between the IPS stats at 15% for impact and puncture, Slash taking the remaining 70% for itself, and range is a solid 2.8 meters. What really carries through though is that every attack from normal to slide to aerials will emit an energy wave in the direction of your reticle that has the exact same stats as Exalted Blade itself. These waves have infinite punch through both terrain and enemy, for which on contact they will stagger them, their flight speed of 15 meters making them quite good at plowing through crowds. Unfortunately, they don't last forever though, taking 2.5 seconds to fully dissipate as they lose 40% of their damage per second they are active, falling off linearly during the time they spend covering their 37.5 meter range. Hitting enemies also has a damage loss mechanic built in at 20% per, which will decrease their lifespan by 0.5 seconds at the same time, but all of this is essentially unnoticeable in actual gameplay. I just wanted you to be aware of it for clarity's sake. Exalted Blade is obviously still a monster of a melee though, and most of that power can be attributed to 3 things. 4 things? Who cares? First is the actual stance present on Exalted Blade, which influences damage more than you'd think. Second are his two augments of Chromatic Blade and Furious Javelin, as they are easily among the best currently around. And third, some of the quirks present only on this melee that elevate it far above the rest, which, trust me, as I said in the intro, I'm talking multiplicative condition overload type broken. They have a lot more going on under the surface than you might surmise, each individual attack combo you see here all having separate statistics which affect your gameplay, as not all of these attacks are created equally. And if you're looking to squeeze out as much damage as possible, there are certain ones that you should prioritize on certain enemies. As a general overview though, Exalted Blade's stance of Exalted Blade has unique animations and values for every type of attack, neutral forward, forward block, and block, unlike certain other stances, looking at you Shimmering Blight, and easily the best one damage-wise is Cutting Poise, the neutral combo. What Poise has over Justice in this area is a 300% damage multiplier on the first two swings of the attack, which do extend to the waves sent out by Exalted Blade and really help with taking down high HP targets like Eximus or Acolytes. But what Justice has that it does not is ease of use. This combo can be used while moving at full speed, which greatly increases your mobility, and it takes just under half the time to fully execute at 1.4 seconds relative to Poise's 3.2, which is incredibly noticeable in game. All that being said, stand still for a moment for high HP targets, moving around and meleeing is fine for pretty much everything else. There's not much of a reason to use the forward block combo. It does have some fun mobility stuff, but it's still kind of and the block combo is also okay. One important note that I haven't mentioned though is that Judge Severance, the slide combo, actually has Excalibur execute a mini radial blind, albeit with lower range and duration and the inability to open enemies up to finishers, but it will still cost you extra energy, so you pretty much never want to slide attack while you have Exalted Blade active. It is a waste of time and energy. Now, it'd be lovely if I could move over to the augments, but there is a weird quirk tied to the stance and energy waves which makes the attack that you're currently performing actually determine the damage multiplier of a wave when it hits an enemy. So if I sent a bunch of forward melees out to them and then did some neutrals when they make contact, they'd actually deal 300% more damage. The spaghetti code behind this Warframe is literally ridiculous. Starting out with the lesser of the two, which definitely isn't a diss because Furious Javelin is a serious damage increase, Chromatic Blade is just, well, you'll see. Anyways, Furious Javelin is a universal melee damage buff granted by hitting enemies with his third ability, Radial Javelin. Radial Javelin is pretty expensive at 75 energy, but the buff granted by it makes it more than worthwhile, causing every enemy hit to grant a scaling 15% more melee damage to Excalibur that functions far differently than you'd expect. While I wouldn't blame you for assuming that this is additive with things like Prime Pressure Point or Condition Overload, this effect is actually multiplicative to every other form of damage increase, factoring into equations entirely separate from them. And seeing as the damage per enemy will scale with strength, it's not all that difficult to hit upwards of 1000% more multiplicative damage in Steel Path. Chromatic Blade, on the other hand, is the Exalted Blade augment and a major key in turning the melee into the monster you see before you, stating that Exalted Blade's damage type will change depending on Excalibur's emissive color, and status chance will be increased by 300%. What all of this means is that now your first emissive color will alter the damage makeup from pure IPS to a color corresponding base element of either heat, cold, electric, or toxin, and Exalted Blade's status chance will increase by 300% of its base value, which would be 45% that scales with strength, but no. Remember how earlier during the intro I mentioned that there is info regarding Excalibur that no other YouTuber has shared with you that is immensely crucial in formulating all of this stuff? Well, Chromatic Blade will actually apply the status chance increase to your melee twice for light attacks, starting at 600% and with a decent build, going all the way up to 1600%, resulting in a 240% increase in the status chance with zero other scaling considered. Furthering upon these quirks though is that Chromatic doesn't actually apply to heavy attacks, which would suck if they didn't happen to have multiplicative condition overload scaling with base damage mods like Prime Pressure Point or the Steel Charge Aura, which will boost their damage immensely. And speaking of condition overload, for whatever reason, this mod is a little over twice as effective relative to the listed value for light attacks, which just results in the expected 240% damage bonus shooting up to 480%. Love that. Lastly, light attacking from wall latches has the weird effect of applying a 400% final multiplier to status chance, but it doesn't work on overguard. I don't know. If you want to trigger a million statuses, I guess you can use this where you see fit though, but honestly, you don't really need it. I do have to pause for a second and give massive credit to Ninjase in the unofficial Warframe server for being the, to my knowledge, originator of all this information. He was also a massive help in build crafting for this video. Go check him out and go join that Discord if you can. I'm in there a lot because that is literally the space for all builds. So, with all the odd but powerful information being covered, let's get back to the basics and choosing the element that we want from Chromatic Blade, which is electric from any blue and purple hue. The reason being, melee influence. I doubt that you really need this one introduced to you, but if I asked you, how does melee influence actually work? Could you tell me? Influence grants a 20% chance on triggering electric with your melee to spread all further elemental status procs to every enemy within 20 meters, regardless of line of sight, in a very powerful way. Firstly, this arcane not only transfers statuses, but also deals damage equal to the respective element amount shown in your mod menu, meaning that a Skana, which has 120 base damage modded with Shocking Touch, would spread an electric dot alongside dealing 108 electric damage, and in Exalted Blade's case, those numbers are obviously a lot higher. Adding onto the list of powerful interactions is how faction damage bonuses stemming from Roar or Smite mods apply here as well. Seeing as faction damage includes itself in almost every calculation in the game, even ones present inside others, they are applied twice on the prior mentioned damage done by influence and 3 times on transfer damaging statuses like electric or heat. And going back to our Skana from before, a 100% roar would now cause it to deal 432 damage, as that it'd be doubled twice, but adding in a few mods would cause a hit from this melee that triggers viral and electric to result in the following equations, which is really complicated, and it is. But all that you need to gather from this is that melee influence is fucking broken. This shit should not be in the game. It absolutely trivializes the hell out of everything. All you need to gather from this is that melee influence is really good, and Excalibur with Exalted Blade is one of the best possible Warframe we can use to take advantage of it in multiple different ways. As mentioned, I have 2 setups for you today, those being Wrathful Advance and Nourish. These are, in my opinion, the 2 top builds for Excalibur Exalted Blade, and each have their own benefits relative to one another, which are actually shown in this lovely little chart created by Ninjase. You may notice this one includes Roar as well, but it actually loses out to either Nourish or Wrathful in every category, so its inclusion from this video was deemed unnecessary by me. Focusing on just these 2, it is clear to see that Nourish is the well-defined winner of mass crowd clearing AoE damage from statuses, but Wrathful will beat it out with premature priming. My personal thing here is that Wrathful is just more of a brain itch for me than Nourish is. Sure, it is statistically better, and that's great and all, but pure red crits is, come on, so much fun. Gonna show you both anyways. Nourish's build up first because it is better, starting with Exalted Blade. We already have electric coming from Chromatic, so what are we gonna pair it with? Well, besides the viral from Nourish, modding wise, nothing actually. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen many other YouTubers doing, pairing it up with things like Gas or Blast. Reasoning behind this is quite simple when you really think about it though. Running other elements here will reduce the status weighting of electric itself, which is the strongest dot currently in the game, as it has an AoE component, no cap on stacks, it will tick instantly on trigger, is effective for single high HP targets, and most importantly, scales off of electric damage sources like Chromatic or Shocking Touch. Something like Blast or Gas has more AoE, and that's always nice, but these statuses don't actually scale damage off of the mods used to create them, which is a real downside, and seeing as electric already does everything they do and better in some cases, there is no reason to use anything but that. Conditioned Overload grants a little over 160% more melee damage per status type, which results in at least 320% more base damage. Prime Smite Orkin for all the benefits it has with statuses on Influence, Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds for 440% more critical and status chance, to bring us to 81% for both. Shocking Touch will increase electric proc damage, Galvanized Steel giving 110% critical chance, boosting us up another 16.5 to 97.5%, and also adds 120% more critical damage for a 4.4 times multiplier when we do so. Elementalist will function as a separate status damage multiplier from anything else we've had so far at 80% more, the bonus status chance taking that up from 81% to 90%. Berserker Fury's attack speed bonus being immensely appreciated here as well. Editing Kai chiming in here. Post making some of this video, I decided to add in 2 Violet Archon shards for 20% more ability damage to enemies burdened by electric, which is obviously going to occur on every enemy we hit. What makes these shards so good is that they function entirely separate from any other multiplier, applying to ability damage after everything else. It ain't really a perfected if we don't got the full shard setup, right? More on the rest of these shards later. Before getting to Excalibur and how he interacts with this build though, you may question why I'm using Discipline's Merit instead of Dreamer's Wrath for my Tennokai, but for whatever reason, you can actually equip all Tennokai mods on your normal melee to essentially stat stick them onto your Exalted Blade. Welcome back, stat sticking. Regarding Excalibur, survivability is more of a concern than damage at this point, and unlike what some people say, it is really not difficult at all to make him survive. For this Nourish setup, we are going to run the route of shield tanking, health tanking being more suited to Wrathful's build for more specific breakpoints we want to hit, but executing it can be done really easily through fast deflection, vigilante vigor, catalyzing shields, and optionally Arcane Aegis. Just these 3 mods and the Arcane is enough to make Excalibur a level cap survivable frame, trust me. Deflection and Vigor grant the exact same stats of plus shield recharge and minus shield recharge delay, while catalyzing will cause your shields to be hit with a 0.2 times multiplier that lowers them dramatically, but your shield gate duration is changed to cap out at 1.33 seconds always. If you were unaware, whenever your shields break in Warframe, you gain a brief period of pure invulnerability from any damage that with this mod will last the time just mentioned, but after that you would then have to wait for them to naturally start recharging, or immediately gain them in ways like Brief Respite and Augur mods. But we don't use those here, mainly due to build space and this build also not really spamming abilities. Note that channels do not count for this, so passive regen is our only choice. Yet that will take an entire second to activate if they weren't fully broken, but a full shield break results in a 4-second cooldown, and if you get shot during that time, you'll just die. What Deflection and Vigor do is lower that shield recharge delay to 1.5 seconds, also increasing the rate at which they charge back up, though it isn't really enough yet, which is where catalyzing shields becomes our saving grace. Shield gate duration is dependent on your maximum shields value obtained before break between 0.33 seconds up to 2.5. Though seeing as we constantly take damage and only 20 or so shields would have been generated, this means that we are still behind 1.17 seconds to not get immediately one-tapped. Yet catalyzing will resolve this issue entirely with a possibly buggy interaction. See, this mod is supposed to only cause a 1.33 second shield gate on a full refill of this value, but for whatever reason, this duration scaling mechanic does not exist in its in-game implementation, causing it to set your shield gates to last the full 1.33 seconds, even if you only generate 1 shield. Going back to Deflection and Vigor now, this means the 1.5 seconds you are vulnerable is cut down to 0.17 seconds, which is far more manageable and easily keeps you alive. Throw in Arcane Aegis and things get even better, as this Arcane has a hidden buff setting your recharge time to 0 seconds, so you constantly recharge shields that give you a full shield gate, making you practically invulnerable. And this effect doesn't change with rank, so anything from 0 to 5 works here, the other effects of the mod being kind of irrelevant. You do still want the other mods though, as this is a chance-based trigger and the others are a necessary safety net. This will just make you truly invulnerable. Alright, survivability being totally covered, the rest of the build though is quite unique. Aura-wise, Still Charge is going to serve as our melee base damage to multiply with Condition Overload for the heavy attacks, the plus 18 instead of 14 capacity also being very appreciated here. In the Exilus, if on Umbra, Warrior's Rest provides more ability strength while deactivating his admittedly annoying passive that can either cause you to lose all your buffs or just downright kill you. So yes, definitely use that one here. Power Drift being suitable on the base or prime if you just like that, and if you want to use prime sure-footed. Both augments here obviously, Blind Rage and Umbral Intensify with Walt Augmented adding to our strength for 318 final. Scaling here is very powerful with Nourish, granting 143.1% more viral damage, a 2.91 times multiplier on energy gains, which counteracts the negative efficiency from Blind Rage, and while the viral wave on damage taken isn't bad, we already spread the status everywhere, so we don't quite need it. Furious Javelin, on the other hand, will now give a corresponding 31.8% more multiplicative damage to Exalted Blade per enemy hit, meaning you'd only need to hit 15 enemies for a 500% multiplier, and only 30 for over 1000%. Chromatic Blade though, well, seeing as it will apply status chance at 2 times this value, that means we gain an absolutely, utterly, unequivocally insane status chance increase of 1908%. Combined with the 440% from Weeping Wounds and 120 from Galvanized Elementalist, that is a 2468% of 15 plus 15, which is 385.2%. Meaning you will proc at least 3 statuses per hit, a 4th being almost guaranteed, allowing for easy maxing of viral and high stacking of electricity if enemies are somehow surviving anything past a hit or 2, which they shouldn't, you know? Lastly, there is Prime Continuity to increase the duration on Nourish and Javelin to comfortable spots, slightly counteracting the drain increase on Exalted Blade, which we further negate when moving over to our companion setup on Nautilus Prime. This build in particular gives us a few things, notably 30% more efficiency from Seismic Bond just for having Exalted Blade active, and a flat 1.2x more critical damage from Tenacious Bond with Cordon, one of its base precepts serving as grouping, which will increase KPM pretty significantly. The remaining mods of Duplex and Manifold Bond with Coolant Leak will serve as additional priming for Condition Overload. The crit requirement for Tenacious can only be satisfied by a few weapons on robotic companions, and Burst Laser Prime is definitely the best one if we also wanted to serve as a status primer, for which these mods are best suited. Adding in 4 unique statuses here will increase base damage over on Exalted Blade by another 640%, these statuses in particular having unique benefits too. Magnetic will increase damage dealt to shields and mainly Overguard. Cold will increase our critical damage and serve as light crowd control. Corrosive will armor strip enemies, and Radiation will hard crowd control them. The usage of Duplex Bond has the Ghost Companion spawn to spread these in an increased area, while Manifold Bond allows you to spam Cordon by reducing the cooldown of precepts by 3 seconds if enemies killed have 3 or more statuses on them at time of death, something we would obviously satisfy, and also have the aforementioned statuses apply to the Coolant Leak mod, which will trigger all of them in a 10-meter AoE around you every 10 seconds, which is obviously reduced down to practically 0 by Manifold. So yeah, your companion is kind of disgusting here, and this can actually be used on pretty much any frame, but obviously is crazy good here in particular. The main loadout though is not super restricted. Primary can be anything. I like the Felarks with the Dexterity Arcane just in case I somehow run out of energy and need to one-tap some people real quick. Grimoire in the secondary slot with either the Netra or Vom Invocation being great for snapshotting higher efficiency, or Strength, your choice. Your melee should be Praetos for movement and parkour speed buffs, the Tennokai mods here too as mentioned before. Focus Ghoul is also up to you, Battle Rifle more strength snapshotting, or Vazarin, or literally whatever. While this build is statistically stronger than anything else on Excalibur right now, a one-shot is a one-shot. And what is a better way to do that than with Wrathful Advance, which would be the focus of our next build, and as my original setup, man, this is a good one. Let's run it back a few scenes to the Exalted Blade build, erase what we don't need now that we have Wrathful, and fill them in with Organ Shatter and Voltaic Strike. Strike is more status chance, which is always appreciated. Organ Shatter increasing critical damage with our newfound focus on hitting them. Bringing ourselves forward again back to where we were with Excalibur though, things are gonna be switched up a good bit on him, health tanking namely being our choice of survivability here. Excalibur Umbra players rejoice, cause we're gonna use those pre-polarized slots to our advantage for Intensify and Vitality, which gives us 55% more ability strength and one of the 4 major pillars required to health tank effectively. Said pillars are a large pool of health, sufficient armor for damage reduction, actual damage reduction from abilities or adaptation, and health regen. To satisfy the remaining 3, Adaptation, Arcane Reaper, and Hunter Recovery will be used. Adaptation is simply stacking damage resist, while Reaper gives both armor and health regen, but it isn't a high enough amount per second to mean that we don't need any other source of it, and Hunter Recovery is a really underlooked mod for this on Panzer Vulpaphyla. Vulpaphyla's viral quills serve a dual purpose in getting us more damage while also providing a consistent health regen, as Hunter Recovery will convert 30% of companion damage dealt into Warframe HP. Obviously, there are other benefits here, but let's get back to Excalibur, both augments obviously, and to make up for the lack of attack speed on the melee, Arcane Strike. For stat buffs, the two major corrupted mods of Blind Rage and Narrow-Minded are used. Blind Rage's strength is necessary to hit our critical chance breakpoint for pure red crits on Exalted Blade, as this 269% is the numerically perfect value for Wrathful, our Hellmonth over his second ability today. Wrathful is pretty simple, requiring an enemy to tap cast, holding giving you a placement icon for which executing will teleport you to them or it. I would recommend swapping this ability in your invert hold tap menu, as we will not be using it to strike enemies. So now that tapping will teleport you, at the same time you do that, you will gain a melee critical chance bonus equal to your power strength that is final, which means whatever your melee's critical chance is, you add this number to it and you will have that as your complete CC. 269 in this case adds perfectly with the 31 on Exalted Blade for pure red crits, which is both powerful and super satisfying. Narrow-Minded makes the low duration on Javelin and Wrathful far easier to manage while also negating the negative efficiency on Exalted Blade's energy drain. Low range can make stacking up Javelin very annoying, but grouping enemies with the Operator Arcane Magus Anomaly and then casting will negate this issue. The only remaining slot left here can be filled either with Prime Continuity to alleviate duration problems even more, or some range if the whole Magus Anomaly thing just isn't your jam. The three remaining Archon shards are divided between two Equilibrium shards and a single casting one. The casting is pure quality of life. He doesn't necessarily need it, but I really appreciate it, and the Equilibrium shards just ensure that you will always be able to stay within Exalted Blade, the health orbs for them coming from a Panzer. Moving past quills and recovery, Martyr Symbiosis will provide you with a health gaining mechanic wherein if you will die, Panzer will actually sacrifice itself to keep you alive, but down itself in the process, which is where Momentous Bond will allow you to quickly revive it with Xmas kills, Seismic Bond for another 30% efficiency, something we obviously want here, same with the previous build, Tenacious Bond and Synth Deconstruct being the other two mods we want. Base survivability for it will come from Prime Pack Leader, which gives it constant overguard from Exalted Blade damage, Cancer Claws being built to increase survival status duration. Primary and secondary recommendations are the exact same, as is the focus goal. So that is Excalibur perfected, everyone. What a monster of a frame now. Really kind of in love with his playstyle. Hopefully Influence doesn't catch any nerfs, but after this and the shit it's doing on Gara and Atlas, yeah, I don't know. Use this while you can. YouTube and patron shoutouts. Thank you to Bored Platypus, Intellectual, Psycho, Dio, Corrupt, Politician, Cyber, Into, again, At Ones, Relentless, Amazuti, Ram, Sniper Monkey, lovely name, Court Bebbington, your last name is amazing, Xtuki, Jojo, Lowbelicious, Jesus Christ guys, Orcus, and Pedro. The support that you guys have shown me is immensely appreciated, and if you want to join them, it's just $5 a month for the shout, and to get this video way before everyone else, which, like, why wouldn't you want to do that? I hope you all enjoyed this one, put a hell of a lot of effort into it. I'll see you soon. Peace.